You are listening to episode number 15 of the Happy Choir podcast. Hola, people. As you know, I've been very busy interviewing excellent guests for this podcast, and this week is no different. I'm Carlos Cordero, host and creator of the Happy Choir podcast, helping you connect with others through choral music. I also want to remind you that no matter if you're a singer, a composer, or a conductor of choral music, this is your place to connect with others. Our guest today is Brent Baldwin. He's an award winning conductor, multi-instrumentalist, vocalist, arranger, and composer. He has directed and performed over 40 world premieres. Yeah, I'm saying that right. As you can see, he's a big support for new music. And he comes today to share with us his experience and his journey to get to where he is today. He is the artistic director of Panoramic Voices and just a beautiful human being when it comes to talk honestly about his journey. So you'll be pleased with this interview. I'm very thankful that you take the time to listen to this interview and to be here for the Happy Choir podcast. Send me an email at carlos@thehappychoir.com if you have any idea or if there is any question that you want to ask me. Let's now hear from Brent. And today with us in the Happy Choir podcast, we have Brent Baldwin. Hello, Brent. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Carlos. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for being here. That's something that, as I keep learning more about your career and everything that you do, I'm amazed by the fact that you take time to do these kind of interviews and to bring more value to our audience. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So I also want to congratulate you because you recently got engaged, and I find it amazing that you have the balance in your life to be a full-time professional musician and also to enjoy all that your life comes to you. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you so much.
So by now, at the beginning of the episode, I will have introduced you and talked about the things that you do here in Austin and in the world, basically. But can you tell us from your own work? I know that our audience will love that. How did you get into music? What were your first steps?
Oh, man. This is, for a lot of my friends, I feel this is a much shorter and direct answer. So I'll try to make it short and direct, but it was very much a roundabout way. I was born into a musical family. My mom taught piano lessons to the neighborhood kids, and she and my sisters would sit around the piano and harmonize. And all of this was in my ear. And sometimes I get dragged into it. But, when we're young, we're not always, making the best choices. And if I could go back, I would have tried to learn a lot more from that. I'm thankful that it was in my ear, but I kind of rebelled against it. I thought, well, that's what my sisters and my mom do. I'm going to go play in the dirt outside. I grew up in Maine, so playing in the dirt was one of the popular pastimes. Not a lot going on there. So, and I sometimes got dragged to church and was forced to sing a solo in the Christmas pageant. But it was something I honestly rebelled against. I loved listening to music and had my mom's records and my dad's records. So I did a mixture of Beatles and Johnny Cash and an occasional, Handel Messiah record. But it wasn't until later on, after going through grade school, just playing drums in the band, because I discovered banging on things was enough to keep my ADD attention for a little bit. But when I was 15, I was playing baseball and I slid into second base, and long or short, ended up in traction for nearly a month and multiple surgeries and having to sit on my butt all summer long while all my friends are off playing. And I had my sister's crappy little guitar, and I just decided I needed to do something to kill the boredom of literally sitting down all summer long. So I just started practicing and picking out tunes and pretty much playing from sun up to sundown. And my leg got better. I didn't really go back to the sports thing. I just kept on playing guitar. But even then, anything that was choir related. I had an innate rebellion against. That was something my sisters did, and I decided that's not what I wanted to do. And then senior year in high school, I was taking a music theory class, and Betsy Lavway, who's still a dear friend, was teaching this. She was also the choir teacher, and she said, you really need to do this. And her selling point was, if you plan to go out and play in bands and let that be your career, which was my plan at the time, she said, you're really going to have an edge if you're able to sing and harmonize and do all of that. So I said, okay. And I ended up singing, did Allstate, and even then it was fun. And I discovered, okay, this is actually kind of cool. But all this time, visual art had been sort of my thing, the thing that was my quote unquote natural talent. So I went off to college and started taking my art courses. Was kind of working through some life demons and needed some change to my life. So part of that change, I decided, was walking down to the music building and signing up for some of the classes just to get better at music, never really intending to redirect my career away from the visual arts. And somewhere along the line, I guess I just liked those classes better than the visual arts. The classes were really challenging to me at this point in my life. I could read music, but hardly with any fluency. And I was surrounded by all these kids that grew up in conservatory environments, and I kind of felt out of place. But I really liked the challenge, the visual art thing. This was just something I always did, I think, before I could talk, according to my mom. And the art contest would come up, and I'd just dash off a thing in an hour, and I would win those often. And it just kind of felt like I was cheating a bit by doing the thing that was my natural talent. So I decided to go against the grain of my own life and take even more music classes. And as I said, it was just really, really fun. And the next thing I knew, sophomore year, I accidentally had more credits in music than I had in visual art. And the dean of the program and I happened to be walking down the hall at the same time. He's going one way, I'm going the other. And I recognized him and figured he just thought I'm some dumb kid walking down the hall, which would be accurate, arguably. And he passed, and then he stopped and he said, "Young man," and he was very Dr. Swift's kind of old school. And I sort of hopped to attention, turned around, and he said, I see you singing in the choruses. I see you playing in jazz band. I see you playing the classical guitar ensemble. Who are you? And I said, I introduced myself, and I said, I'm technically focusing in visual art, but I just thank you for letting me play in your program here. And he said, well, if you ever decide you want to switch majors, come talk to me. And so I went and talked to him, I think the next day, and then did my audition, and all of a sudden I was majoring in guitar and beginning the lucrative, always calm career of a professional musician.
This is amazing. I mean, knowing all the work that you do here and the different organizations that you work with, I can see how all of this story relates to what you do now. And it's amazing to see how everything got, a little bit of constructing your story in the music. I admire that much because, sometimes we can be so centered on one thing.
Yeah, no, I see that. And I would be the first to admit that whether I'm playing one of my, I play a lot of different instruments, none of them I would say at an expert level. I sing, I conduct, I compose, and I would never say that I'm excellent at any of those one things. But again, with my ADD personality, I just discovered there was a beauty in being a generalist of sorts and being able to, if I have 5 different rehearsals in a row in any given week with different groups that I work with, it's something a little new every day. And I have so much respect for my friends who only focus on Baroque music and only singing and and performing that at the highest degree. And I think I figured out pretty early on, with my late start, especially, that this was not going to be, even though I focused on classical guitar. I was an electric guitarist. I blew out my tendons when I was 20, right after I'd auditioned to be a music major, which was one of the worst periods in my life. But a few things came out of it. One, I came back to the guitar a couple of years later after not playing, and I focused on classical guitar, which was a brand new thing for me. Again, I wouldn't say I ever got to world-class level, but I did concerto competitions and just I had that one period of my life where I really focused on something. But in that interim of where, basically my hands were in braces for from age 20 to 20, almost 22. And I really couldn't play for more than a couple minutes on guitar without my tendons just screaming at me. After I went through the obligatory feel sorry for myself and imbibe and things that will go unmentioned, I kind of pulled myself together and said, well, okay, what are some other things that I could do while I'm getting my fingers back so that they can take on this thing that at that point in my life, I was most passionate about, the guitar. And so when I was making my little list of things, I did sing a bit. And as far as conducting went, I had a music theory teacher who was a bit of a drill sergeant, and working with him, he's also my first composition teacher, Dr. William Doherty. He made us, do those sight singing tests that we all have to do on solfege, and he would also make us conduct. If this is in three, here's the 3 pattern, here's the 4 pattern. And that was really the extent of my formal conducting when a dear friend of mine had to take a medical leave and leave her choral program unattended for a couple of months. And I had dropped out of school because I couldn't play guitar. And I just kind of stepped forward and said, if I can help in any way, I'm not a gifted or trained conductor like you. But she and I had worked together, and she had taught me voice and everything. And she said, no, I'll take you up on that. And so I ended up with, again, very little training, conducting this pretty well put together choral program for a couple of months. And then when she came back, she asked if I could stick around. The kids and I got along well, and it was a high school program, and I said, yeah. I think this is going to be really a fun thing for me to do while I recuperate and get my tendons back into firing shape. And so eventually my tendons got better. And then somewhere around the time I moved to Austin in my mid-20s, I was having some thoughts. I realized, I don't think I'm ever going to be the greatest guitarist on the planet. And I'd played most of the rep, and it's a limited rep. And I'd been singing a lot more professionally. My voice got better, and was just kind of looking at a lot of my friends and who were conducting, and people I looked up to who were older than me who were conducting. And I thought, I've been at this point, I've been directing, theater pits and church choirs that maybe weren't incredibly skilled. I'd been doing long-term substitute conducting things. I conducted an orchestra. I finished a music ed degree just to be safe, in case my tendons never got like really, really strong again. And somewhere in all of that, I just decided, as a kind of faking it conductor, I think I'm doing more to pay my rent than I am in probably most of my guitar gigs. And that, coupled with the just kind of growing bored with guitar, not bored. I mean, I still play and I love it, but the concept of being a solo musician, not collaborating with other people, going to the gig by myself, coming home afterwards by myself, it just felt like this might be a lesser existence than if I rechanneled my energies and decided to really study conducting formally. I think through informal studies, I'd become, for a young person, a pretty decent conductor, but I'd never declared myself a conducting major. So here I was at UT Austin, and I was studying with Adam Holtzman, who's one of the best guitar teachers on the planet, and he was very, very sweet to allow me to take, I think, what was probably the last empty spot. And I just had this epiphany that I think I want to go talk to this guy down the hall named Craig Hella Johnson and audition for him. And so, after some time, I finally made that happen and ended up studying formally the conducting art and finishing out my master's and beginning a doctorate. And then, blah, blah, blah. I told you I can't nutshell this story, but I've just sort of been doing that thing for quite some time as, one of my main life and arts focuses.
And I love this story because it's such a idea of being brave and embracing what's happening in the moment, which it's important for everybody to realize. It's difficult to have such a straight path in music. I myself, I've been just taking every turn that that I see. It's like, oh, now I'm going for composition, now I'm going to compose for this, and it's kind of just risking and seeing what happens, if you like it, if you enjoy it. So it's very inspiring to hear that even though you had some challenges or difficulties along the way, anybody will have given up or not find other ways that they can use their, because what I feel is that you use your vision a lot, in your trying different things. I can hear that you were trying to still be creative, and I wondered, were there any fears or self-doubt that you had in this process of, now I'm going to this conducting this choir, or now I'm going to conduct this musical theater bit? Is there any fear in that moment, challenge that you felt?
Oh man, it's a great question. And I am sure that I've experienced fear, I think, every day. I'll go conduct a group I've conducted for 10 or 11 years, like I have with Panoramic Voices. And that first rehearsal, I'll admit I'm always a little nervous. Like, is this going to be the one time that everybody hates the music I picked out, or is nobody going to show up this time? Will I be not as prepared as I hoped I would be? So I think, we as human beings, we carry those fears with us, and it's always there. But I've also, I'm not sure why it is. I was a pretty quiet and timid child, and it's not like I ever was a boisterous extrovert, and I don't imagine that will ever be the case. But I don't know. At a couple of points in my life, I just was, especially in my younger years, like to do public speaking, things like that, would really just lock me up. And it was really just a matter of getting out there. Back when I was 15, when I was sitting on the couch all summer long, it turns out if you are sitting on the couch and playing guitar for 8 hours a day, your progress can be greatly accelerated. And I think that was my case. Now, was I stage ready? No. But did I have friends who play drums and play other instruments and recognize, like, oh, wow, Brent can play most of the song before he crashes and burns. So let's let him in our band. And then just getting in front of people and playing for them. And often, early on, terribly. But just realizing that when I walk away from even a bad performance, like, okay, it didn't kill me. So yay. Nobody else was, their life was not threatened. They were not physically harmed by this, not stellar performance that I just did at age 15. So I think just recognizing that the end of the world doesn't occur when you try something and you fail. And then the other one too, going back to an early part, when I went off to college, and was struggling with things, to be more candid, I was dealing with not a minor bout of substance abuse, and I was in the punk rock scene, and that just happened. It was a difficult tailspin to haul myself out of, but there was a beauty in that once I got through all of the not pleasant stuff that is surrounded in all of that I I kind of felt like, wow, I think I almost died somewhere in there. I mean, I know I can pinpoint a couple times where that very well, I came right up to the edge, and I'm not proud of that. It's just something that happened in my life. And I had a friend who wrote me an angry email and said, you're a screw up. And while everybody else in my life was just being like, oh, please take care of yourself. And I love them for that. But I kind of needed a musical competitor, I should say, somebody that was in a different band who's gone off and done some wonderful things on his own. But he kind of called me out on it, said, you're just a screw up, and you're not, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're not going to amount to anything. And I kind of needed that challenge and that push to be like, oh, yeah, I'll show you, you jerk. And so I cleaned up my act. And at the end of that rather dark tunnel, I realized, well, I barely survived to age 19. I'm kind of living on borrowed time. This extra time is a gift. And so, I don't know. It just felt like, well, this is sort of like getting a free round of, in a video game or something, or it's just like an extended gift. And at that point in my life, when I was very young, it just felt like one extra year feels like an amazing thing. I'm much older now, and years just, man, they fly by, and
Yeah.
they seem, less consequential as a result. But, I kind of felt like, well, I survived something that by all right, I probably shouldn't have survived. So here I am. So let me do some things that are scary to me. And so I kind of went from being a very shy person to somebody who would go try out for the jazz band when I had no freaking clue how to play jazz, and then get some books and study some recordings. And
That's wonderful.
And so anyway, that's a long rambling response to that. But I think these little life events where I just said, okay, I'm going to try something, and I'm going to give myself permission to fail miserably. And if I don't do that at least once or several times a year, I kind of feel, and those years do happen, where I conduct the same groups and I don't compose something that really, pushes a boundary I feel I personally want to push. I kind of feel like, all right, well, next year, this coming year, I'm going to write for an ensemble I've never written for, or write for an instrument I've never written for, conduct a bunch of pieces I've never even sung before, much less conducted. And I don't know, it keeps my brain, I think it keeps the synapses firing, and it just makes me feel like, okay, I haven't settled, and I'm going to use this gift of extra time, which is now a blessed many years, to experiment and see what can be done and see what you can get away with, and more often than not, see what you can't get away with.
Well, and something that I love about this story too is that it seems like with every challenge that comes your way, you push back even harder. You were even more fired up to, okay, now I have to do this, and I can incorporate this, and you just were going to figure it out. But as you said, that I just love the idea of, I'm going to let myself fail miserably and explore the thing that I want to explore, even if I don't know what's on the other side, or or how do I do it right now. You were brave enough to audition for these groups or take on these different tasks. I mean, it's really inspiring. So thank you so much for
you're
this
welcome.
response.
I thank you.
Yeah. Hey people, I want to take a quick second to tell you how your support makes a difference. When you support me on patreon.com, you are not only giving $3 a month, but you are giving my brand a vote of confidence. This translates to helping several other artists to connect through choral music. Think about it as a cup of coffee that you invite me once a month. Only that is way more impactful and personal. Plus you get to be part of the behind the scenes of my career as a composer, with the many perks that I shared in there. Even if you're not able to give right now, your support listening to this podcast is great, even more if you leave a review in iTunes. Patreon.com/Composer Cordero is the link that you want to visit or share with others. Hope to see you there. learning more about your career, I can see that you have the performer side, the conducting side, and then the composing, the writing side. So, did you ever during your this career had to choose one that you had to put in front of the others? Did you feel that you had to focus on one?
I think I did. And when I was doing all of the classical guitar competitions and whatnot, I felt I had enough professors who were extremely well-meaning and still dear friends of mine who really were pushing me to specialize in something rather than be singing roles in a musical and then going out and doing guitar gigs and then conducting this whatever I was conducting at the time, and playing multiple instruments and blah de blah. And for a while, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to be the good student, and I'm going to do all of these things. I'm not going to just quit a bunch of things and do just the one, because I knew I'd probably get really frustrated with that. My brain needs to have constant re-stimulation. I don't love that my brain works that way. It's just the way it does work. And so I did do that focusing for a while. And the lesson I learned from it is, you really do improve vastly when you focus, in my case, on the classical guitar. But the other thing I learned is I don't want to only be one thing. As a human being, as a musician, as an artist, there's just too many things that I find interesting. I tried to tell myself in that time period, even though I'd played clubs from my teens and I'd done all these different types of musics, that the classical music is the thing. I was surrounded by people that, if you liked Bach, you couldn't also like the Beatles. I don't think that exists so much anymore, but when I was younger, it's something, if you didn't act like you felt that way in music school, you were kind of, people would look down on you a little bit.
We'll look you weird, like, oh, what are you? Yeah,
exactly.
What are you choosing?
Yeah, and that's always just been weird to me, and I don't know if I think I might attribute some of that. I don't know, just embracing a breadth of things, going back to the record collections of my mom and my dad. I mean, they're no longer together, but my dad was kind of he's into country music. And I'll admit, until I moved to Texas, I kind of hated country music. And now I've been here for a long time. I've really learned to.
It grew on you.
I adore it. And what I discovered is that you just have to find the right country music. But the music my dad listened to when I was growing up, I really didn't love it. But there was this one guy he would play, and I'm like, okay, I don't really like country music, but this Johnny Cash guy he's pretty cool. He sings really
just
deep.
The one that speaks to you.
Yeah, he spoke to me, and my mom played her Beatles records, and that all got in. And then she'd also play, it was like a children's choir record of, I can't even tell you the rep, although I've heard some of the rep in my later years. And I wish I could find that album. The radio was off and on. So, those things were seeping into my brain. And I just decided I didn't want to shut off a bunch of equally valid sounds, and to not be influenced by that. And that in this day and age, frankly, I feel that there's nothing profound in anything I just said. But back when I was young, it just felt like there was more of okay, you have to do classical or you can do this other stuff.
So it was more like a statement back then, when you felt that, oh, I either have to choose it or this, but when you stand by your idea, yeah.
I adore, in my brain, like, everything informs everything else. And I think composers, especially younger composers, of your generation especially, they get that, and that you can listen to a Radiohead song and incorporate some of those sounds into compositions. Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead is a composer in his own right. To use one example, there's a lot more fluidity between these worlds than there were, certainly when I was coming up. But I would say, people who are a generation or two prior to my coming up into the music world. I imagine back in Leonard Bernstein's time, like, yeah, maybe you can listen to jazz, but don't listen to any of that crazy Beatles stuff. It'll warp your brain, man.
Yeah, it's amazing to think how closed we can be sometimes.
Yeah, and we're all guilty of it. And I feel, if I have spent a year where I just happened to conduct a lot of different oratorios, or if things were balanced on one side, I kind of feel compelled to remind my friends who play in the rock scene in Austin that, hey, if you need a sub, I play guitar, pedal steel, bass, blah, blah, blah. And just getting out there and doing that. And I sometimes my week will be I'm conducting an orchestra and a chorus, and then the next week I'm playing in a club downtown. And in the middle of that gig, I'll get this idea, this harmonic change that my friend, she wrote in her song. That reminds me of something that Foray did in this piece. Here, I'm going to go compare the scores. Oh, yeah, they use the same sort of modulation scheme here. And
how awesome.
Come to think of it, I have a few pieces that I started and didn't know where to take it. Maybe I'll go experiment with similar sorts of modulation schemes and see what happens. So all of these things inform one another. I remember reading or seeing a documentary. I've read quite a bit on the life of John Coltrane, and of course watched any documentary I can, and just back in the days, like the really high level jazzers, the Miles Davises of the world, the John Coltranes, where if you were a trumpeter, you were also inspired by the great saxophonists of your time, and you might say, I want to make this solo happen, but I really want to make it sound as much like John Coltrane's sound, or Sonny Rollins, or whomever. And they weren't locked into this, I want to make the best trumpet sound I can make. They were really trying to break out of that and not get constricted by the trumpets, quote unquote technical limitations, because there's often all the extended techniques, or Charles Ives is another favorite example where, he famously went to, he's an insurance salesman. Like, I love the fact that he was somebody, just to tie it into your theme, who was famously an insurance salesman. And on the side, he composed. And because he was self-sufficient, he didn't have to make any sort of musical concessions whatsoever. He was going to write the way he wanted to write it. And if people didn't like it, that's okay. He can still feed himself.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but he famously went to some of the top New York classical players and hired him in, because he didn't typically have a lot of people coming out of the woodwork and saying, hey, we want to pay you to write a piece, and we're going to pay the orchestra and whatnot. So he was doing a lot of self-funded things, especially early on, and he'd hire these high caliber classical players, and they would sit down and they would try to play the piece, and they would say, Charles, this is not playable. You've written something that cannot be played by people. And then what he did is he turned around, he went to the people playing in the Broadway pits and the jazz players, and he said, would you play my music? And he put the music in front of them, and they just played it. Because they didn't have these, that's, I'm a bassoonist and you've written this really high note. And so some of these folks perhaps didn't know that they weren't supposed to be able to play these notes, and they played it. As so the legend goes.
You start to just, thinking, okay, what are the things that I can do, and what are the things that, I can try, and they don't have to sound great, but maybe I discover something, right?
Or interesting is sometimes as fun as quote unquote great. Yeah,
that's also true.
There's so many, I'm somebody who, I don't know, it's amazing I'm engaged, and it's probably not a small wonder that I've gotten to my age that I am and haven't been engaged before. But a lot of it may have to do with the fact that I do spend a ridiculous amount of time just, I've got instruments around me here in the studio, and I also have all these different contraptions of just power tools and pieces of metal that I banged together, and I thought they sounded kind of cool, or when I scraped them. And even though we're a good better than a half century in of the first wave of really out there experimentalists, John Cage and Stockhausen and all those folks, I believe there's still there's an infinite world of sounds that composers or soundscapists or whomever have not yet touched upon. Like, who hasn't banged this, a book with 700 pages against this power drill that's also drilling through the book and making a mess. I haven't tried that, but now I might have to go see how it sounds.
Sounds amazing. Yeah.
So I do spend a lot of time just walking around the house. I'll bang on the bookcase and like, oh wow, I really kind of like the timbre of that, but I think I want it with a soft mallet. So I'll get a soft mallet and I'll bang on it. And fortunately, my fiance Emily finds that entertaining and not annoying.
Wonderful.
So far.
Well, and that then when you start thinking, an instrument is an instrument, and everything becomes, the world becomes an instrument per se, right?
Yeah. No, it's one of those things. Back when in my freshman year, I was singing and studying with J. Scott Ferguson, who's still a beautiful musician out there doing things, and a dear friend, at least on the Facebook front. But we were off on this little New England choir tour, and we ended up at the ferry to Martha's Vineyard because we're going to go there and sing a concert. And this and right next to the on the dock of the ferry, there was on its side this huge propeller that they'd evidently taken it off and replaced it and just kind of left it there. And I had a percussionist friend, Eric, who's still a collaborator to this day. We went over to it and we just started like tapping on it in various parts, and it just made the most amazing sounds. And then we were kind of jokingly busking on the dock because we got like all the choral singers around. It's like, what are these idiots doing? But it was one of those early times in my life where I realized, if you mess with this, or even if you take traditional instruments, put them in funny tunings, which is often how I start all of my compositions. I'll take preferably an instrument that is not my specialty. Guitar, my fingers are more likely to go to all the things that they know how to do.
Yeah,
exactly. Whereas if I pick up a banjo or ukulele, I'm a little less skilled on those, and I'll find a voicing that sounds cool, and it'll take my brain a few seconds to figure out, that's a stacked fifth thing. And I'll just try to improv some things, sketch some things down, or record it, and then build something off of that. Or I'll take a guitar and I'll put it in a weird tuning, set it down, come back to it tomorrow after I've forgotten completely what tuning I put it in, put some parameters on us, but let the parameters be at the same time be quite broad, and just see what the hell happens. And more often than not, it's a horrible mess. But I'm of the mindset that I like the quality over quantity, and I believe in that in terms of what you're churning out as a final product. But when it comes to the process and the creation, I believe in the exact opposite of that. That if you are going to sit down and write, you're going to be a more successful artist, I believe, or at least for me. If I sit down and I write 100 songs or compositions, and if 3 of those I feel really good about, then all the 97 pieces that are perhaps something I laugh at because they're so terrible are the things that they were necessary in that process to get to the 3 that just kind of jumped out. And it keeps all of the brain connectivity and and this is, stuff I learned from back when I wanted to be a poet, all the Natalie Goldberg books,
which I love.
You're familiar with her too?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
she's one of my favorites. Anne Lamott, all of the great writers on writers. But the common thread, it seems, I see through all of those is just put the pen to the page. They're using analog, and then just go and don't stop. And even if you're writing, this is stupid, I don't know why I'm doing this, I could be having a nice cup of coffee instead of doing this stupid exercise that won't amount to anything. And then eventually the part of your brain that picks on you like that just realizes, okay, he's not stopping. So, and that goes away. And sometimes on page 3, this phrase that you never thought you'd be capable of creating just drops itself on the page from the universe. And you're saying, thank you, universe. This is one of my favorite sentences or musical passages or sounds that I've ever created. And even if nobody else likes it, I, as an artist, I can stand behind it 100% that I like this.
You're able to appreciate it.
Yeah. So anyway, it's that process thing. So in the process, quantity over quality every day.
I just want to quickly remind you that all of the links that are mentioned in this episode will be in the show notes in thehappychoir.com/podcast or find it in the description of this episode. Also, once you are there in the website, you can subscribe to the newsletter. This will come with a $20 discount for your next choral recording, a free guide that I've created just for you on the things that I've discovered in my career on how to be a happy composer, conductor, or singer. You will also receive a weekly email with podcast episodes, blog posts, and music. I hope to see you there. Now, let's get back to this episode. And now that we are in the last minutes, just real quickly, do you have any announcements or current projects that you would like to share with us?
Well, coming up this Friday and Saturday, Panoramic Voices will be partnering with Lola, which is a local opera company, local opera, local artists. And we will be, in this partnership, we'll be presenting Purcell's Dido and Aeneas because, of everything we've already talked about. I will be composing some little stormscapes and interludes in between the music that Purcell wrote. And also because whenever we have the opportunity to present new works, we do. So we have also a piece on the program called Forgiveness. It's by a brilliant composer whose name is you, Carlos Cordero.
Thank you.
How'd you like that setup? But no, it's seriously, I'm going to make you blush. It's a beautiful work, and everybody's been having a joy learning it and putting it together. It's going to feature a beautiful singer friend of mine as well, solo singer Katrina Saprosantos, and it's gorgeous. And that will open the program. And so I'd love for everybody to hear Carlos's piece.
I'm so excited that this collaboration happened because the way that we embraced that process was so different from what I've done before. We planned it and we talked about how it will work with Dido, but also how it will stand by itself and how it involves the community. So it was a great exploration for me too, as we were talking here in the podcast. Such an exploration, healthy exploration of the risks and things that you can do with the choir. So just thank you so much for that opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the beautiful piece.
Real fast, what's one thing that you wish, let's say, singers? I always like to ask this question to my guests. What's one thing that you wish singers know or do?
Well, it's a little tricky for me to say because I tend to be surrounded by singers. We tend to attract people with, whatever attributes we have as people, as artists. So I tend to be surrounded by people who kind of get what I'm going for. But I also know there's a lot of singers out there that either used to sing for me and don't anymore. But just, keeping your ears open and keeping, not just as performers, because obviously, I think it applies to any singer. I forget what the actual percentage is and who first said this, but, something to badly paraphrase it, like singing is 15% producing sound with all of these mechanisms that we have in our body. and 85% is listening. And so, so that's on the microcosm. If we're really blending in with our neighbors, this is, I think, something we're doing. We're listening as much, if not more, than we are producing sound. But on the macro level, just going back to everything we were talking about with not placing limitations on ourselves, and the possibilities. It's like, to go back to something we were saying earlier, I sometimes imagine there are groups out there in the world that only do these handful of pieces or these handful of composers, more likely than not, this kind of the dead white European set. And that's fine. If that, I don't want to take anything away from any that makes them happy, but I sometimes imagine what it would be like if we were living in a town like Austin that has pretty much any cuisine that you could ever dream of. But I only want to go to Luby's. I only want this one particular type of, or I only want to go to McDonald's, or I only want to go to, I don't want to do Tex-Mex. I don't want to do Thai. That's just a little too spicy and scary. And what a sad existence that would be. And again, if that makes people happy, you can send your hate mail to me. But it sometimes feels like that in certain pockets of the classical music world. And anytime that I see friends breaking out of that, and again, if you like McDonald's every now and then, go nuts. I'm as a vegetarian, I don't find myself there that often, but there's a world of cuisine out there. There's a world of visual art. And a lot of these friends of mine that will kind of limit the rep that they perform or they go to hear. I'm pretty sure they love Thai food, and they don't think that visual art died around Turner and all of this other Van Gogh stuff. That's just too nutty for me. And so, for singers, I sometimes will experience singers who just kind of have those blinders on, and don't lose track of Mozart, don't lose track of Beethoven, but maybe try expanding your world. Try singing, Pauline Oliveros piece, or Carlos Cordero piece, or what have you. And I think you're going to learn things from that. I think you're going to take the knowledge that you learn from that. You're going to bring it back to Beethoven and sing Beethoven better. And you're going to hear it in a different way. And on top of that, you're going to hear Beethoven perhaps in a way that a lot of his contemporaries did, which was probably as often as not, this is a joke, right? Everybody knows that famous string quartet that was reading through the Beethoven. They were laughing, thinking, this is
what is that?
What the hell is this? Is a joke, right? You're playing a prank on us. And he said, badly paraphrasing again, I didn't write this for you. I wrote this for a future generation.
Exactly.
And now we listen to all of Beethoven. It's like, well, that's pretty, and it's dynamic and it's bold, but at this point we don't hear it, most of our ears, as weird or strange. But I think that's something that, just doing, if you have Thai food, it's going to build your appreciation for Tex-Mex, or for, just having the comparison of the different cuisines. So it's just, and I am just as guilty as anybody of going to the same restaurants and eating the things that I like. But every now and then, Emily and I will just say, nope, we are going to, Google restaurants in Austin, and whichever one comes up, in the top 20 searches that we haven't been to, unless it's a steakhouse where we probably can only eat the rolls. We're
just an adventure.
Yeah, we're going to go. And maybe we'll hate it, but at least we didn't go to the same restaurant that we go to twice a week. And just, I'd encourage singers to approach music in the same way, with that openness to adventure. And who knows, maybe you'll discover a type of music that you just absolutely adore, or maybe you'll discover you really don't like that music, but hey, you gave it a shot, and I think there's something beautiful in that.
Well, and I love that you used food examples, because I'm always using food examples, and people are, think that that's cynic. So now I found you too. That we use. Yeah, I love food examples.
Oh yeah, it's, I mean, it's from the, I can't help it from, the visual art background and the doing theater. Just everything seems to kind of be like that. The first couple decades of Paris, where, the Ballet Russe, it would feature backdrops painted by Picasso and music by Stravinsky and choreography by Nijinsky. We sometimes lose track and get in our silos of, this is the symphony over here, these are the choral folks over here. But I if I had a time machine, that's where I'd head straight to, just to experience what it was like to be around in a time where, and I think we're arguably in a time like that right now. I like to think so, where art is art and everything flows. That dance informs chamber music, and chamber music informs pop music, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, metaphors are always going to be something that I'm boring all of my singers and orchestral players with, and any poor interviewer that happens to bring me on their podcast. So you're welcome. I'm sorry, and you're welcome.
No, believe me, that the way that you make the connections and the way that you find the ideas that, we don't all see in that way, it's just such a world that, we can talk here for the whole day. So I just appreciate you that you find the time to share with all of your experience and the way that you see the artist world, because it's, as you say, today we are not just musicians, we are not just one side of this music or dance, but it's more open, it's more limitless in a way. So this has been so great that I'm excited to
you're welcome.
See where all of these great ideas that you share today take us to keep exploring and keep being inspired just by the thing that we're curious about.
Amen.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Brent.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos.
See you in the next episode of the Happy Choir podcast. Ciao, people. Woohoo! You've been listening to the Happy Choir podcast. For more information and show notes, visit thehappychoir.com.